Time now for Morning Rounds. Joining us are CBS News Chief Medical Correspondent Dr. John LaPook and CBS News contributor Dr. Holly Phillips.
There were several medical stories about babies and children this week. First up, a report in the New England Journal of Medicine could revolutionize prenatal screening for Down syndrome and other disorders. John?
Vanita, the study examined the effectiveness of a simple blood test and could affect millions of pregnant women.
When 29-year-old Jennifer Fontaine was pregnant last year, a standard blood screen suggested her baby had a severe genetic defect.
It was very devastating to read that the baby might not make it through the birth. The baby might be stillborn, or if she does make it through the birth, she may not live up to her first birthday.
But that standard blood screen isn't definitive and has a high rate of false positive results. So Fontaine was given the option of either an amniocentesis, an invasive test that carries a 1 in 600 chance of miscarriage, or a more targeted blood test, which analyzes fetal DNA circulating in the mother's blood. She opted for the blood test. After worrying for more than 2 weeks, she got good news. There was no defect.
It was the best feeling ever to know that everything was fine and that, in a few months we were going to have a perfect baby little girl, so we were happy.
Since 2011, the fetal DNA blood test given to Fontaine has been used to screen high-risk pregnant women for several chromosomal defects. Researchers wanted to find out if this DNA test could be useful for low-risk women as well. They looked at samples from 1,900 women and found, for Down syndrome, the standard screening had a 3.6% false positive rate compared to 0.3% for the fetal DNA screen. That's a 10-fold reduction in false positives. Dr. Diana Bianchi of Tufts Medical Center led the study.
Far fewer women are made anxious and need to go on for the further counseling, and certainly there's a reduction in the need for an invasive diagnostic procedure.
John, in your piece there, you mentioned both high-risk and low-risk women. So who, by definition, is high-risk?
A woman at high risk is a woman who's going to be over 35 at the time of delivery, or there's a major abnormality on the fetal ultrasound, or there's a family history of a bad genetic defect. Now, already women at high risk are getting this special test, but we're talking now women at low risk, which is most women. And the problem is, if the standard test tests positive, there's a very high chance that it's wrong. It's really okay, but it's just a false positive. And in these women now, you have the opportunity to get the special fetal DNA test. If that's negative, then everything should be okay. But if that's positive, then you have to go on and get amniocentesis or some other more invasive technique.
Is this covered by insurance, John?
For high-risk women, yes. For low-risk women, no. But that may change as time goes by and we see the benefits of this new test.
Also this week, another story that made headlines. The FDA continued deliberations on a controversial procedure. Experts are considering approving a fertility technique, creating babies from the DNA of 3 people. Holly, does that mean they have 3 parents? I mean, what's happening
Anthony,
here?
it is sort of confusing. No, they still have 2 parents, but they do have DNA from 3 different people. So this is a technique that would be used for a group of inherited disorders known as mitochondrial diseases. So mitochondria are the energy source of the cell, and they're passed down from mothers to children, and they have their own DNA. If that DNA is defective, it can cause illnesses like epilepsy, even organ failure, blindness. So the way this technique works is that they take a nucleus, which has chromosomes, from a mother with defective DNA, and they put it into a donor egg, a mother who has healthy DNA from her mitochondria. So ultimately, you end up with an egg that has chromosomes from one mother, mitochondria from a different mother, and then you fertilize it with the father's sperm.
It's interesting because the researchers here say this is not gene modification, this is gene correction. Exactly. But it certainly seems like this is a slippery slope in terms of people saying there's some ethical and there's some safety issues involved.
Right. Well, right now, what the FDA is looking at specifically is the safety, both short-term safety and if there are any long-term consequences, because when you change a person's DNA, that's forever and then gets passed down through generations. But you're right, people are raising the question about, are we creating designer babies here? When do we say when? Can we then modify for, say, blue eyes or taller children or smarter children? So that's something that I think in time we're also going to have to debate both as a society and in the medical practice.
Safe to say we'll hear a lot more about this story. There was some good news this week about progress in the fight against childhood obesity. A government study finds obesity among preschoolers has dropped by 43% over the last decade. Researchers say kids are eating more nutritious food and getting more exercise in daycare, and they are consuming fewer sugary drinks. Obesity rates for adults did not show a similar drop.
But here's something that might help. On Thursday, the FDA announced plans for major changes in food labels. This is the first overhaul of nutrition labels in 2 decades. The move is designed to address the reality of how Americans eat. John, what about these new labels? What's changing?
Well, the calories and the serving sizes are going to be bigger type, more prominent, and much more realistic idea of what a serving size is. Not what people should be eating, but what they're actually eating. My favorite example here is that right now a serving of ice cream is a half a cup. Who has a half a cup of ice cream? I said, I'm just getting started at a half a cup. Okay, so much more realistic.
A pint is a single serving for me. Thank you.
And we go on from there. And then finally, about added sugar. 16% of the calories that Americans eat are from added sugar. That's now going to have to be listed, and that may change behavior.
You know, but we've seen restaurants, a lot of them now list all the calories, and I think it's not really changing what people are eating. So the real question is, regardless of what the label says, are people really reading the label?
You know, it's interesting, Vanita. We are actually. More than half of people, when they buy packaged foods, actually read the labels. And the studies have shown we're appropriately skeptical if it says low fat or low calorie, high fiber. People are actually double checking on the labels to make sure that what the products claim is actually true.
John, how's the food industry reacting to this?
Right now, they're cautiously on board. There is a 90-day public comment period, and we'll see what everybody says then.
Finally, this week, there is one kind of nutrition that needs no labels at all. Many studies have shown that babies who are breastfed have higher IQs. Now, scientists at Brigham Young University say they think they know why. This is really interesting.
This is interesting. And, you know, I find it particularly relevant because it's not about the breast milk itself. It's about the process of breastfeeding and what that means in terms of parenting. So basically, what the study showed was that women who breastfeed are more likely to pick up on emotional cues from their children and be more soothing, and are also more likely to read to their children by the time they're 9 months, if not before. It really doesn't have to do with the breast milk itself.
Right. It's just the close proximity to the child.
Absolutely. And I actually find it wonderful because women who don't breastfeed or can't breastfeed for some reason can still really ensure that they're doing the best for their children just by this.
All right, it's something that everybody can do, even men. Read to
Spending
their
time
kids,
with the
spend the
children. Not
time,
the
be emotionally
breastfeeding.
intelligent. No, not the breastfeeding, but just it's something for us all to do to help the children.
Dr. John LaPook, Dr. Holly Phillips, thank you.